Beautiful star seeds out there. Today on Dare to Dream podcast, I'm speaking with Suzanne Giesman, who's a mystic and a psychic medium. Suzanne's going to reveal the extraordinary ways that our departed loved ones reach out, offering comfort and answers to life's most profound questions. Dare to Dream podcast won 3 Talk Radio Positive Change Awards, the COVR Award for Best Podcast Show. Welp magazine named Dare to Dream one of the top 20 best podcasts to listen to this year, and it's high ranking on Apple Podcasts. Just as a note, the show just got picked up syndicated in New York, where I'm originally from, 102.7. So if you're back east, you can listen to us there. And if you're listening to us and you'd like to see us, go ahead, check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Debbi Dachinger, and also on Spotify under their videos. This show is sponsored by Dr. Dane Here and Access Consciousness. They do energy work out into the world, so you can become a facilitator or take one of their classes. Go to Dr. Dane Here, HEER.com, and sign up today. If you'd like to know what your galactic ancestry is, unlock your cosmic potential with my gift to you, free starseed report and video breaking down and exploring 19 different types of starseeds. It's captivating information in a detailed report about your galactic origins. Is it time to uncover them? Well, don't miss this chance to connect with your star lineage. Go to DebbiDachinger.com/starseed. That's DebbiDachinger.com/starseed. This show has been on air for 17 years and podcast somewhere in there, probably around 10, 15 years so far. And why it keeps going is because the type of conversations, the master classes I feel I get to have. It has certainly changed my life being here. So thank you for being on the journey. I really, in anticipation of what I'm going to read later, thank you for your comments, for subscribing, for liking. I do read them all. Here's a couple events before we get started that you should be aware of. Folks are signing up right now for the largest channel panel in Sedona. It's the first week of January 2025. This is a weekend of workshops that I am speaking at and presenting at with other channelers like Daryl Anka, Wendy Kennedy, Jamie Price, Rob Gauthier, and Lisa Royal Holt. Start your new year off the best way. Secure your spot and go to, for tickets, DebbiDachinger.com/Sedona, DebbiDachinger.com/Sedona. And finally, big drum roll, I am also speaking, moderating panels. I'm even doing a live podcast at February's Conscious Life Expo. That's February 7th through the 10th, 2025. It's their 23rd annual. It is a who's who of spiritual and amazing people. It's an opportunity to spend time with us over a whole weekend in a hotel. Get your tickets at DebbiDachinger.com/CLE for Conscious Life Expo. DebbiDachinger.com/CLE. I'll see you there. And now on to our guest. My guest, Suzanne Giesman. She's an author, she's a teacher of awakened living, and she's been included on Watkins' list of the 100 most spiritually influential living people. She is a former U.S. Navy commander and aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with a master's degree in national security affairs. And today, she shares 21st century spirituality, merging the latest scientific understanding about consciousness with ancient spiritual wisdom. Suzanne's work provides stunning evidence of our essential interconnectedness. She teaches proven methods that anyone can use to connect with the many levels of our multidimensional reality. Suzanne has authored 15 books, 6 best-selling HemiSync recordings, and YouTube videos reaching millions of viewers. She produces The Daily Way, Inspirational Messages, the Awakened Way app, and hosts the top-ranking Messages of Hope podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Suzanne and her work, you can visit her website. It is her name, and it is SUZANNE, and the last name is GIESEMANN.com. And with that, I welcome the amazing Suzanne Giesman to Dare to Dream. So great to have you here.
Wow, Debbie, great energy just floating in.
Thank you. I'm excited. I really am excited to meet you. I'm going to start with your book that I read, which is Mediumship, Sacred Communications with Loved Ones from Across the Veil. And there's a quote that says from you, at the quantum level, everything is connected. Science has now shown what mediums experience firsthand each time they communicate with non-physical beings who have survived the death of the body. The brain does not create consciousness, and we do not cease to exist when the body dies. I'd love for you to elaborate on that and also connect mediumship with quantum science for us.
That's the whole key right here. Mediumship is not woo-woo. It is based on frequencies. I remember you talked about your events, wonderful events coming up in Sedona. I met a scientist on a trail while hiking in Sedona, and we got to talking about why I was there to show my Messages of Hope documentary. And she said, well, I can believe that you were a Navy commander, but I don't believe in mediumship. And I said, but as a scientist, you would understand that it's really just a matter of frequencies. And a medium tunes into frequencies that are right here. We simply can't sense them with our physical senses. Would you not agree, I said to her, that we have instruments that can sense frequencies that our bodies can't? We call them televisions, we call them radios, and beyond. And she couldn't argue that point. And I said that we just need to learn to fine tune the body like a radar and like an antenna. And we can, by shifting our consciousness and raising our vibration, tune into the more subtle energy that is right here, right now. And I showed her, I gave a demonstration right on the spot, and it kind of left her speechless. So,
did you start to perceive somebody who was coming through for her?
I did not. I said, her husband looked at me and he said, well, if you can fine tune your antenna, perhaps you can tell her what her specialty is as a scientist. And I didn't like being put on the spot, but then I thought, well, I have nothing to lose and I truly trust this field that we're part of. So I simply used the technique that I have to fine tune the antenna. And I turned to her after asking the field, what is her specialty? Using the tools that I teach people how to use. And I turned to her and I said, cellular biology. She literally shuddered. You could tell it hit very close to home. And she couldn't explain that, how that I knew that, and gave her a couple of the things that I got on the spot. I don't like to do that. I don't like to try to prove anything to skeptics. I like to simply let the evidence that comes through transdimensional communication to show us this is real and anybody can learn to do it.
Yeah, and that is so specific, that information you gave her. I can imagine that where do you go from there? Truth is truth. So good on you. I'm always very aware of who my audience is that I'm speaking to you. And I also don't like being put on the spot with my gifts. It doesn't happen very often with me, but when it does, it's like, doesn't really work like that. It doesn't feel like that.
I will tell you that she said, she corrected me. She said, it's not exactly that. And I said, okay. And turns out she was a structural biology scientist. I've never heard that term before. They deal with cellular biology. So I was able to discern the closest thing that could get through my conscious awareness. It rocked her world enough that she got back to me later. She actually went online and dug a little deeper, which is very cool.
Well, that is very cool. Well, here she was initiating this conversation with you, and you start out by saying, yes, I worked for the Navy. I had a career as a naval officer, served at the top level of the United States military. Well, I can only imagine that this transition to becoming a medium was a very unexpected development in your life. Can you share a little about that and also how you coped with that kind of transformation, because that can, for some people, be a lot to suddenly be happening.
Yes, it was certainly nothing that I would have consciously chosen. I know my soul chose it. I know it's a calling now, but with my background, who wants to go around and say that you do things that most humans disdain and don't believe? But once you see the healing potential, the way it changes and saves lives, I couldn't not say I am a medium. And what that shows us is that we are all connected. That the spiritual teaching to me is the real goal here. But it came about, unfortunately, through a serious wake-up call, two of them really. I flew over Manhattan as the World Trade Center towers were burning. I was in the last aircraft in US airspace with the chairman. We were the only aircraft on our way back to Washington. We landed in DC, went back and stared at our gaping hole in our office building. And I started asking the deeper questions then. I had no religious upbringing, no spiritual background whatsoever. And I had no answers and did not get answers at that time. I just ran away from life. At 20 years to the day I retired and started living my dream with my husband of literally sailing off into the sunset on our boat. But as I said, this is a path, it's a calling that came about a few years later when my stepdaughter, Suzane, was struck and killed by lightning. That was way more personal than 9/11, even though that hurt deeply. These were colleagues of mine that passed, but I could walk away from that. I couldn't walk away from this pain. I needed answers. And the biggest epiphany, though, Debbie, was when I saw Susan's body in the coffin and something in me stirred in a way it never had. And I had this knowing her body looked so different because there was no spirit in it. That the soul that I've heard people talk about is a very real thing that enlivens the bodies. And I knew Suzane was so vibrant and present that she had to still exist. And I said, I'm going to find you. And that's what opened me up to this whole new world.
Do you still have contact with Suzane to this day, or has she moved on? I assume they move on anyway, but has she moved on in such a way that there is no contact any longer?
Our loved ones may move on in the same way that we may move to a different country, but we are always accessible. We may not need to call home as much as before. Our loved ones may not need to call us, but always part of our soul family. And so even if one aspect of her soul decided to reincarnate, the Suzane pattern, the Suzane story, the Suzane frequency will always be part of her soul, and a medium and I could connect with that. So we do still have occasional connections. Today is my husband's birthday, her dad's birthday. So she's a little closer than normal on days like this, just like any family member would phone home on a special occasion. But in between times, she's left me amazing evidence that she's around even when I'm not even aware she is.
Oh, that's beautiful. When you talk about you can still connect even though she or anybody else moves on, are you talking about connecting to an oversoul when you refer to that frequency?
The oversoul is a better concept to use when talking about reincarnation than just soul, because most people I've learned think the soul is just associated with that one incarnation, and then that one's over and we go on to another one. It's more that the oversoul has various incarnations and we're tapping into the oversoul. Yeah, it's a beautiful definition of it.
Okay. I know that contrasted with a bereavement group, someone such as yourself, a psychic medium, can actually play a key role to communicate with loved ones in spirit, help make this shift for grieving people from a state of grief and emotional heaviness to actually entering into peace of mind. And I will say, last year we had two of our dogs die within 6 months. It was a lot. It was a lot of
Yes.
loss and definitely grief. And how we got through, besides feeling and expressing, was hiring somebody who could literally talk to the dogs on our behalf. And it was tremendous because we knew immediately, oh, this is our dog. This is
Yes,
the
yes.
voice and personality of our dog. Each one so different, but what a beautiful difference it made. I think it sped things up tremendously. Talk.
Absolutely. And it's the evidence that does it, not just an animal communicator would say, oh, your dog is here and they love you. You got that personality and probably specific traits that they had. I want to tell you that you talk about healing, Debbie. Just this past month, my main assistant's mother had a stroke and went into a coma and did not regain consciousness. And I've spoken to souls in comas, and I said, Stephanie, what do you say we connect with your mom while she's still living in the body? And she said, let's do it. Oh my goodness, the evidence that we were talking to her, the personality of her mother that shined through completely changed the trajectory of her journey towards what was inevitably her transition. But it allowed the whole family to know mom is present in awareness. She sees what's going on in the hospital room. She hears us. She's laughing at our awful singing, that kind of thing. So that when she did pass just about 10 days ago, the family, of course, still grieves. But with that awareness that mom's still here, it really, like you said, changes everything.
I'm really curious what she was able to transmit while in a coma. Was she able at all to share the experience
Yes,
that, yeah?
yes, absolutely fascinating. Right away, I described the personality, and I'd never met her mom. Very unique personality. In fact, the thing that cracked up my assistant when mom said, the first thing when I realized what had happened was I said, did I leave my room neat? She said, oh my God, that would be my mom. But her mother showed me she was experiencing split consciousness. She was aware of being in her body and seeing what felt like foggy clouds rolling in. And she said to me, I've never wanted any altered state of consciousness, but this is kind of nice. And her daughter said she wouldn't even take an aspirin. She wouldn't take a sip of alcohol. So that was more evidence in that way. But she said that she was feeling just a little discomfort in her left arm where there was an IV, and it was too warm and people were putting a blanket on and taking it off, putting it on, taking it off. Both of these things absolutely happening to her. She showed me her daughter putting a rosary in her hand, taking it out. I didn't even know they were Catholic. Yes, indeed. All day long, my assistant had been putting a rosary in her hand. She said to my assistant, her daughter, you don't need to worry about what you wear to come visit me in the hospital. Turns out Stephanie had tried on 3 different outfits. Oh, I can't wear these holy jeans. Oh, this is too tight. My mom would be embarrassed. She changed her clothes 3 times, and her mother knew that. But then she described the utter peace of being above her body and watching everybody, hearing them sing and laughing at the monotone brother. And the most beautiful thing, Debbie, was she showed me those squishy balls you use for arthritis. She showed me she showed me little ones shaped like hearts. She said, everybody's praying for me. And when they pray, it feels like they're throwing little love bombs at me, like those hearts. Turns out she had 2 of those in her independent living room. So her analogy was perfectly chosen, but shows us our prayers were felt. And she said, I'm not coming back, but I'm hanging around a little because I'm loving all this attention and all the love. It was beautiful.
Oh my goodness. What a gift to Stephanie. What a gift to the family.
Yeah.
That's tremendous. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of Dr. Eben Alexander.
A good
His,
friend. Yeah.
oh my gosh, he's been on the show. He sent me his books and this near-death experience. He had Life in Review. I mean, his also in coma, his incredible awareness. And so for people like this and others, when they pass to the other side, most I understand who go through this life review, they can have
Yes.
spirit guides at their side and they view their entire life like a movie playing out. But unlike in a movie, the individual who has died can also see the effects of the actions they took.
They don't just see it, they feel it as
Feel
if
it.
they were the recipient of that. And it's
Right.
very attention getting for them. And it really causes an awareness that they want to make amends. They want to change things. And that's a beautiful thing that a medium allows those across the veil to do, to make their apologies, to give their thank yous, to bring up specific moments that were important to them. I love that aspect of this work.
Yeah, this is such an important point, I feel, because many of us in the spiritual world and otherwise have heard this over and over. You pass, you have a review, there are phases, but the idea that you can feel the actual reactions, the actual emotions, how your choices affected other people, if there is anything that would cause people to clean up their life starting right now, I can't imagine what it is. Because when I heard that recently, over the last year, that's the first thing I did, was starting doing a life review. Whoa, is
Every
there
day.
anything I need to clean up?
Yes, if you go to the bed at night and do a life review of that day, it's changing, life changing. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I can imagine you hear some apologies as a medium to people. Has there ever been one where it really changed the living person's life experience?
Oh, many, many. That's, and I mean, in an instant, the one that comes to mind immediately is a an older woman who sat with me, and I said, "Well, your mother's here," and she comes in immediately with an apology. I see her head hanging down, and my client stiffened. So I asked silently. I do it silently because if I ask a question out loud, my client will think the answer, and I could pick it up from them, and that's not ethical. I want to hear it from the spirit. So I silently said to this mother, "Why are you apologizing?" And I saw charades. She showed me rocking a baby and then tossing it over her shoulder. And I knew what she was showing me. I said, "Your mother shows me that she abandoned you as a baby." And the woman bitterly said, "Yeah, me and my 8 brothers and sisters." So then I went back to mom, who's right here, and I said, "Why did you do that?" And she explained what was going on in her life at the time, what she was feeling. The woman was very quiet, my client. She took it all in, but as she stood up to leave at the end of the session, she looked at me and she said, "I have carried anger and resentment at my mother for 75 years, and in 1 hour, it's gone."
Wow.
Understanding, seeing through the eyes of another, having that perspective that you might not have. It happens all the time because those in spirit know what we need to hear. Doesn't happen every time. Somebody asked me the other day, "Do you ask your client who they want to hear from?" And I said, that would make it really easy because I don't see the spirits. I have to feel them. Other mediums see them. I don't. I have to feel that personality and hear them and see what charades. But I said, there's a very important reason why I don't say, "Who do you want to hear from?" Because then I will go directly to sensing and tuning into that person. When the spirit world may have another agenda, there may be somebody who's the last person you want to hear from because you had a contentious relationship, but they need to make amends. And that can be healing for both of you. Oh, I remember doing a reading for a woman. Her mother had just passed. And she says, "Does she see what's going on here?" And I said, "Your mother says that you and your family are fighting over the money, and you've even gone to lawyers." I had one woman say in spirit, "If I had seen what that money would do, I would have burned it before I left." And the client hadn't said anything. She just said, "Oh my God." But in this case, the mother started saying what the kids needed to do to resolve this. And my client, she sat there, she was going, she says, "I want to push this little buzzer that says, but darn it, it's true. And I know this is what we need to do, but I don't want to do it." It was amazing.
Wow. And I hope that was recorded so she could bring it back to the family to say, "This isn't coming from me, y'all. You need to hear it straight from mom."
I do record them, and I tell everybody, if a medium says you can't record this, run, because we have to trust that what's coming through is coming from spirit and not made up or what we think somebody wants to hear.
Hmm. I mean, I'm so curious if you've ever done a session for somebody and had an extraterrestrial or exotic life form, even a cryptid, something come through to communicate other than a human life form.
I'm searching the memory banks and I haven't, and I know the reason. Which book is this in? I think it's in my book, The Awakened Way. I tell the story of when my guides left no doubt in my mind that they knew physically, literally exactly where I was and where I was traveling to the next day. They led me to something that showed that they knew all those things. And ultimately, it led to this big lesson to me that I was diving into realms that they didn't want me to go into. I had a lot of books on topics that many people that look into metaphysical things love to talk about. And my guide said, we gave you this lesson because we wanted you to know your lesson, Suzanne, is to teach only love. Stick to the basics, bring credibility to mediumship. They told me if I veer off into ETs and other things that are a little bit more on the fringe from mainstream, love it, fascinating, it's real. But they want me to at least let people know we are all connected. And that's why the kind of connections that are possible with ETs, with other beings, are possible, because it's all arising from one field, the 0 point field.
So I imagine when you say this, that because of all you've done, because of teaching love, teaching this interconnectedness, and because of who you get to experience here and in other realms. It's funny how we do this, but there is no this, right? It's all here right now.
That's right.
In this moment. So no fear of death for you at all?
None. No. I'm just checking in. Has anything popped up that I'm afraid of? I certainly would not like to experience pain.
Mm-hmm.
And my greatest fear that I held for a long time was having seen my husband literally crumple to the ground when we got the word that Suzanne had died, feeling his pain so deeply. I don't want to die and have him go through that again if I die before him. But I can't control that, and worrying about it does no good. So I just don't go there. I trust spirit. And even if that does happen, I know there is great growth that results from it. So knowing that, we set it aside, and boy, it's just freeing.
Yeah, it's so true what you say. I mean, pain, and especially the unexpected kind of devastating pain on the other side, should we choose that, each of us, is the greatest transformer, the greatest healer, the greatest way to evolve and come out of duality and separation into way more oneness, way more love and compassion. And pain can teach us that, how to care more deeply, love more deeply, invite more in.
Yes, I give the example of being on a mountain bike ride one day when I was trying to recharge after a strenuous workshop that I led, just mentally, emotionally strenuous. And so we went for a nice flowy ride just to get out in the fresh air and get the oxygen flowing. But all of a sudden the trail became a little technical with rocks and roots, and I got really irritable really fast because I was overtired. And I remember saying to myself, this is supposed to be relaxing. And I heard this booming voice in my head say, it's a mountain bike trail, for God's sake. And I started laughing because it was the perfect spiritual lesson in that moment. I signed up for this, and it's going to have roots and rocks. And Spirit is saying, this is life, for God's sake. It's not all going to be happiness. That's not the goal. The goal is to roll around in the muck and the joy, to experience all of it and say, it feels so much better when I align with love, when I make choices that bring everybody into the results, when I serve others instead of only myself. That feels so much better. That results in flow. I'm going to choose this instead of that. That's what the pain leads us to.
Absolutely. And I love this story so much, Suzanne, also because it really speaks to resistance versus releasing attachment, right? The attachment to this was difficult. Now this should be easy. I need something to reconnect me with nature and to be fun. And it's not turning out this way. And so I'm resisting this experience. I mean, we've all been there. And I even recently, so you may experience this or not, but in, some of the speaking things I'm doing. So for instance, I'm really pulling back the curtain, but I'm okay with that. I'm speaking on a cruise coming up. And one of the elements of being a speaker for everybody, no matter your name on this cruise, you have to bring in at least 4 passengers, right? And that's just one of the deal in order, not only just to speak, but to not pay to play, to not pay to speak. And so I was sitting there watching my reality like nails, watching, oh, you got two signups. Oh, you got three. Oh, someone dropped out. Oh, this is going on. I was interviewing a lot of the headliners on my podcast, having somebody write in the comments, I just booked the cruise. Awesome. I send it off to the cruise person. And they're like, oh, they signed under somebody else. And I'm like, they went under my podcast guest. Like,
Mm.
I was pissed. I was really resisting and I was pissed because it was feeling like work. It wasn't fun. It wasn't how I anticipated. And you know what? I literally got to the place just 3 weeks ago where I said, take it, whatever.
You go.
If it's my path, because I'm this far, I'm going on Friday, I'll pay. I'll do it. I'll go have this gorgeous experience with some amazing people. And if it's this, what I got to tell you, I got the email today, letting it all go and just flowing in the river of life. And I got the email, you're not going to believe it, Deb. And they made an exception for me. But because it's you literally just got 4 people 3 days before the cruise. I'm like, thank you very much.
Well, all that angst is a sign that you're in the human story instead of shifting to the soul. And we see that all the time. So you let go of the focus on the story, you let spirit take over, and that's when things change. This is one of the main teachings of the Awakened Way that's resulted from what mediumship has taught me, that we are not only human. We get attached to our story instead of shifting to the soul's awareness, like doing that life review and saying, why am I really doing this cruise? Is it to get the free cruise or is it to help 4 people? When you make that shift,
yes,
then the energy shifts and you attract what you need.
Yeah, that's good. Because that always is why I do it. It is to be with some of the other presenters because I made some beautiful friendships with people who speak around the world. And I'm very grateful for that. And so that's meaningful. Going to the Yucatan, never been, very meaningful. And all the 100, however many people just in our group, I am very excited to meet them and spend time, yes, and to lift up and share my message. So yeah, so important. And you're right. I was so deeply in that story. And the only thing that held me back, I could have acted out, trust me, a lot more based on what was happening here. But I'm friends also with the event people, and they have a name, and I love them. And I know it takes a lot to do an event. And I was not going to burden them by, texting this craziness. So I held back a lot, which was great because it forced me to be with it and to feel what was going on and to recognize I really don't choose this. I
Yeah.
don't prefer right now what I'm creating. So release the story, release my version of resistance to what was going on for sure. Thank you for that. Thank you for that piece.
I have a Caribbean cruise coming up. Same thing. So I understand the whole deal there of balancing, why are we doing this? What's it all about? So, yeah.
Yeah, and how you typify it out to people, because that's really important, instead of using copy and mailing that stuff out. It's really in my heart. I mean, I really did have a lot of excitement, and how cool for you. You're probably going with the same people as I am. I want to ask you a little bit about this higher perspective that comes with a spirit no longer in a body. A lot of spirits, as you shared, want to apologize for incidents and behaviors. But, well, this is such an interesting question. How deep can a spirit remorse go?
Well, they let it go when you no longer have the body. I have not felt remorse as we understand it in human form, talking to spirit. I feel an awareness that an alignment can be made, but I don't feel those across the veil suffering. Oh my God, I have to make amends. It's more like, this is for my soul's progression. I need to do this. It's much more of a detached from emotions, because our emotions in our human body are caused by chemicals, hormones. When we no longer have those hormones coursing through, now we're just dealing with awareness of the soul. And there's awareness that this is not, I did not make choices that helped the evolution of my family and myself. Let me make amends. You see, there's a whole, without that emotional component, we change our words and it gives things that different perspective that those in spirit have. We can have that now and make higher choices.
And so when you speak about the no emotions, that they're gone, not being in human form, then this is also how they're able to tolerate, if you will, this life review, where they can feel and actualize everything from all these multi perspectives of what their actions.
Yeah, it's an energy much more than a feeling. It's an awareness, I would say. But please understand that love is not an emotion when we're speaking spiritually. It's a deep sense of connection. So the one thing we become most aware of when we're no longer in these bodies is love. And that is what guides everything. And we want more than anything to express that to our loved ones. I can tell in a reading if a family member never said, I love you. I can tell if they only said it a few times. I can tell if they said it all the time. And regardless of which category they fit in, they want to say it now. So I'll say, your father is saying, I love you. And he knows this is strange for you to hear it because he never said it was here when he was here. But he knows now what's most important. And he's coming back to say, I love you. It's tremendous.
Tremendous. Totally. I don't know. When you said the word love, there was a big breath. So the way you conveyed that, I think it all got us into our hearts to hear it said in that way. Love is not an emotion, and that love is connectedness. And that's the most beautiful thing, really.
Yeah.
Love, listening, being there. I want to talk a little bit about your book, Mediumship. So many books you've written, so many books, which is really impressive. Why this book? Why now? What can people find in the book?
Well, this is part of a beautiful series by Sacred Stories Publishing. It's called the Common Sentience series, where the publisher has asked leading teachers in various fields that have to do with spirituality and metaphysics to talk about the field that they're an expert in. And most of the books have all the books have one-word titles. Mine is Mediumship. And the publisher asked around and said, who's the best person to write this book on mediumship? And came to me and asked me if I'd write it. And I hadn't actually done one that was strictly about what is it? How does it work? Who can do it? And so that's part one of the book, answering all the questions, the foundations of what mediumship is and how it works. Part two is just like all the other books, contributor stories and two of my own that give examples of sacred communications across the veil. It's a fabulous, pick it up when you need a lift, put it down, pick it up again, and be just enthralled by these real stories of common people. And then part three are practices that help anybody make that connection with loved ones across the veil. So I said yes right away because it's a no-brainer. This is information that will really help people.
Yeah, and I liked reading it because the compilation idea, when you talk about picking it up and putting it down, you can read a chapter and then you can put it down and come back. And then there's another chapter. There's a whole nother vibration to the person who's sharing, the person who contributed to the book. They do a great job over there at Sacred Stories, and I rather enjoyed it. And folks who want to find it, Amazon, your website.
Right. All of the online booksellers. I remember that I was asked to put out a call to my community members who wants to contribute stories, potential stories for this book. And I said, I don't have the time to read all the inputs. And they got hundreds. And luckily the publisher said, we'll choose and run them by you. And they sent me these 30 contributions and I was enthralled. And I remember I'd read one and I'd say to my husband, honey, you got to hear this one. I never get tired of what I call in the book, and I call everybody who knows me and follows my work NOEs. You talked about Eben Alexander had an NDE. Many people have had an OBE. Well, an NOE is available to all of us. That's a no other explanation moment or experience when you know that came from beyond this reality. There is a greater reality, and we're part of it.
An NOE. I love that. No other explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, we're living in a world full of those, I feel, today.
Yeah.
And more people are being born gifted these days. There's probably going to be new names for the gifts that our children and our children's children are being born with. For the ones we know, there was one in your book I had not heard before, which was pretty amazing. Claire Alliance, is that how you say it?
Alliance, that's when you can smell something that your loved one in spirit wants you to smell, like their perfume or a cigar or the pizza that they always used to love to eat. And I, having had this experience, it is absolutely as real as if the scent is in the room, because it is. Everything is here in awareness as frequencies, energy, information fields. So one day I did a reading, Debbie. My nose was so stuffed up, I had to ask Spirit, can I do a reading with this cold? And they said, do it. And in that reading, the Spirit showed me a trunk that my client, his daughter, had in her attic. And he showed me her opening that trunk to look through memories recently. It was a current event he was showing me. When he opened the lid, I smelled musty, moldy things as clear as if he'd opened it right in front of me. Yet there was no way I could have smelled anything. And that just showed me that what we think is real and solid is just energy information being perceived in awareness. That's what connects us all. Consciousness.
Consciousness, yeah. That is, and I found that so interesting to learn this word through your book. One of the many things I learned, I know for sure I'm clairsentient. And when I learned that well into my adulthood, changed my life. Oh, so beautiful to have this awareness. And I always assumed I don't lead by any means with this clairaudience, but I have a modicum of it. And I used to have some of the strangest experiences. Once I was at an elevator, I was waiting with a bunch of people and I was like, oh, that's beautiful. And I was smelling like these cinnamon buns, but nothing you'd have here on earth full of sugar. It was beyond. And I turned to the other strangers and said, oh, God, do you smell that? Where's that coming from? And every person looked at me like, huh?
Yeah. Besides the fact you're not supposed to talk in an elevator. Right? So
I've
some
had it.
loved one likes cinnamon buns, no doubt.
Yep, roses, same thing. I've had that one often.
Hmm.
And it's a beautiful experience. But now I understand it better. So when it happens and I see, I kind of take a look around and, okay, nobody's responding here, but I'm getting it for sure. Whatever that is, thank you, because it
Yeah.
feels very loving and benevolent.
It was probably somebody's mother, and that was the favorite thing. She made homemade cinnamon buns. Yeah, that's the way it works.
So yummy. And I would love you to clear up claircognizance.
Oh,
So that is interesting to me because when I learned that word many years ago, I went, oh, that makes sense. This is how, when people, I don't know how to explain gifts. I've never understood how to explain mine. And even these words feel like labels. But the best I can say is I know what I know. And it's
well,
definitely a
that
knowing.
is claircognizance. That's the definition of claircognizance, when you just know, but there's no rational human way of explaining it. And a good example is a reading I did last week, brought through my client's father, no, husband. It was her deceased husband. And I'm describing images that he's showing me. I have his personality very clearly. And I said, wow, all of a sudden he's showing me that he wore cowboy boots and a hat. And I just know he lived in Texas. She said, oh, he did for many years, lived in Texas. I didn't know where she was. She wasn't in Texas. But you can see that the boots and the hat, that was clairvoyance. I could see the image. But the Texas, he didn't say it. He didn't show me the state of Texas. I just knew. That's claircognizance. That's just energy information that's in the field and doesn't need to be put in a category of visual, auditory, any of those.
And I think there's a new one. I'm going to say that there's a new one that I don't fully understand, but I know because I've been trying to explain this. And it'll be interesting to hear if the listeners and watchers have any similar experiences. But sometimes when I do these interviews with folks like yourself, it is like I'm plugging into something, uh, some kind of field that you certainly create, and maybe you and I together create, but it's dominant with you. And then I hear everything you're saying, but I'm not really receiving you through my ears, but I'm receiving your information through energy. I don't even know how to explain that, but the download energetically is tremendous. It's very exciting. I just want to make it clear.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
And
this is the thing. I've led 2 cruises, and both times, because we spend so much time together, the groups, the people have come away embodying more of the soul, they say, because there is a transmission of energy. When I work with my guides, like I am now, I told you before the show started, I asked them to speak through me and with me. And there is a higher energy that we all take in, and it lifts us and changes us. What does it mean to embody more of the soul? If you are this oversoul that is embodied in a temporary physical form, for a while, there's only so much of that higher energy you can take in. But as you go down this path, you're able to hold more of it. Like going to the gym, you build up your muscles. So the more you immerse yourself in the higher energy of higher consciousness, the more you can handle and the more insights you get. It's a total win-win situation.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
In your experience, Suzanne, what are some of the more unexpected or symbolic messages that you've encountered from loved ones across the veil? Things that might challenge the way that we traditionally think about those communications.
Ooh, the most stunning to me took me years to get to that point, because if I couldn't imagine the kinds of awful things that humans do to each other, I couldn't perceive it in a reading. It was not able to get through the filters of my brain. And so one day I was very interesting. Do we have time to go to this story? Yeah. I had this experience with a friend of mine. She was doing a crystal bowl ceremony, and suddenly I felt this Black Panther leap from behind me and come into my energy field. I was sitting there while she's playing the bowls, making the motions like I was that panther. When we went around afterwards and everybody shared their experiences, before they got to me, a woman behind me said, "Well, it's so strange. I've had this Black Panther as a spirit animal for years. He told me during a ceremony when he first arrived, he would stay with me till I no longer needed him, healing from the death of her son." She said, "It's so strange today while you were playing those bowls, Candace, the Black Panther left me and leapt out of me." And I turned around and said, "And into my field. I wonder why he's come into my life." The Black Panther is a protector. The very next reading I did, I sensed this spirit animal with me. And I wondered why he was here. For the first time in over a decade of doing readings, in came my client's father, but in a way I'd never seen. And this is metaphorical because it was given to me in a way I could understand it. He was cocooned, like wrapped up to the neck, and accompanied by 2 benevolent beings. We call them angels. Very loving, but he was escorted in, and the panther sat at my side, just sitting there like a guardian. And the angels told me this woman's father perpetuated truly monstrous acts while he was here. And he has been shown the effects of his actions. He is not being permitted to allow his energy to merge back into the field until he makes conscious choices to make amends. And just coming here today to show you that he's working on himself is as far as we'll go. She looked at me and she said, "My father was a monster. He murdered and raped numerous teenage boys." What a shocker to me. And this is the first time that this panther showed up at my side. The next time the panther showed up before the reading, very similar scenario, only this, another father, was able to tell me himself what he had done. And the client showed that that was who her dad was and what he'd done. And then the third time, and probably the last time the panther showed up before a reading, I said to my husband, "Mark my words, my client today will have been sexually abused by whoever shows up." And she was. And all this healing took place. Phenomenal things happen from spirit when you open up to the possibilities and hold the intention that it's going to be helpful and healing. And both sides were helped here. That was a hell of their own making, you see? But they were accompanied by loving beings who didn't judge them, just said, you make these choices yourself, to repattern this energy.
That is such an interesting story. Really, it is. And I want to just address it a little bit, maybe give a few cents worth here from shamanic perspectives. So in shamanism, we work with the four directions in the earth and the sky and the cosmos. And the direction to the west is called Atarango, which is a Quechua word for jaguar, very much in this cat jungle family. And the jaguar and the panther are known for a couple of things, but the most important medicine they bring is bridging us across the rainbow bridge to the other side, to death, literally to death. So it's very interesting to me that you would have that level of protection and guidance and medicine.
And having never studied this, never read it, it just unfolded. So this is why I trust these connections.
Yeah, and they're absolutely also known when you think about them. Some animals, their medicine is very obvious just by observing them. And for sure, the jaguar, the panther, a lot of their medicine is they're very, very family oriented, right? They're very bonding and loving with their family, but they're obviously also tremendously ferocious and will kill, maim, whatever, to protect themselves and others. So it's also interesting from that perspective that they bring in this ferocity and gentility and bonding as well to work with you and some of these people in these more difficult situations. And
so it's very interesting when I go into a session not knowing what is going to unfold. I could have a reading like that that's profoundly healing with a lot of drama and trauma. And then I have some where I go, oh, this is just a family reunion. And it's mom and dad in a functional family. And they just want to say, hey, we're still here and we love you so much. And we see that, you know, your son graduated. We're keeping our eye on him. So it's just such a mixed bag like life, right?
Yeah. And speaking of animals, are there consistent patterns with animal companions that communicate compared to how humans communicate? Do you have experience there?
I do occasionally sense animals, and just like when somebody who never spoke English is in the spirit world and comes to me, they transmit thoughts which get translated by my brain into English. So when I communicate with animals, we're talking in English words, and they have beautiful messages. They tell me what their life was like, what they want their loved one to know here. And I insist on evidence. How did you die? What was your favorite thing to do? That kind of thing. And they share it. So it's a beautiful connection we have with our animals.
Thank you. Well, Suzanne, this is Dare to Dream. So what do you next dare to dream? What are your future dreams and goals?
Well, we have one of my favorite books that I wrote is called Wolf's Message, a profound story about how connected we all are. It led to the Awakened Way teaching, and it's being made into a documentary right now. It'll be out in 2025. So my overarching goal is to just do Spirit's will, to be their instrument, their voice, their messenger of hope. And this documentary is going to be one way that we really let people on a bigger scale know that this is real and why we're here, to love each other and to take care of each other and to understand we're not only human.
You're not only human. And so people can find you at your website, Suzanne Giesman, and it's SUZANNEGIESEMANN.com. Anything else you have coming down the pike that we should be aware of for folks who are interested?
I do. I have live conferences with the publisher of the Mediumship book, several of them coming up, and I'll be at the Omega Institute live. That Caribbean cruise is coming up. Online classes, anybody can learn to connect, and I love teaching that. So just go to my website, just scroll down to the featured events, and there are so many resources and free gifts on my website, and my YouTube channel has hundreds of videos with the teaching in it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for the work you do.
It's a joy, truly.
I end today's show with this quote from Rita Mae Brown. I still miss those I loved who are no longer with me, but I find I am grateful for having loved them. The gratitude has finally conquered the loss. Subscribe to this #1 transformation conversation, Dare to Dream with Debbie Dachinger. Leave a comment. Thank you so much in advance for that. And when you subscribe in the next coming weeks on Dare to Dream until the end of the year, on the show is going to be Thomas Winterton from the Skywalker Ranch, Trisha McCannon, Jason Quitt, Marie Diamond, and Barbara Lamb. Thank you for joining us today on the show. Remember,